The question was, if you couldn't hear it, what can the mayor do about education? And when I announced for mayor, I said I'm going to make education an issue. And I said I don't know exactly what it is. And I spent 8 months with Council President Tony Young, who became my friend. And we went out and we talked to teachers and principals and parents. We listened, we learned, we talked to business leaders, you know, what do you need? And we put together a plan. I'll walk out. But it was an interesting reaction. When I announced for mayor, I said we're going to talk about education. And everyone said, well, the mayor can't talk about education. I'm like, sure you can. I made something in the city charter prohibit me from talking about it. And they're like, no. And I said, well, then I can't. And then they said the mayor doesn't have time. And I'm like, time? We were talking about this a long time. I said, I've watched the city have debates for months on end about harbor seals and fireworks. We got time. We'll just make it a priority. And so the plan we outlined is a fairly simple one. It's in 4 key areas. The first is we're going to end the digital divide. A country that put a man on the moon 40 years ago can ensure that every child has a computing device with access to the internet, because the younger generation learns differently. My 3-year-old son can unlock my iPhone and delete the apps. He can open the computer, type in the password, go to the internet, his folder, and start matching his letters. Kids learn different. You go into communities in San Diego, and I'll never forget going to the library and seeing kids sitting on the bench outside. I'm like, what are they doing? They're like, they're waiting. I'm like, what are they waiting for? The library's empty. They're waiting for their turn on the computer, so they can do as much homework as they can in their 30-minute block, and then they got to go back out and sit and wait in line again. We're never going to be the world's most innovative city, so we can solve this. There's 42 different organizations that are a part of working on this. Different school districts are doing different things. But imagine if we got them all together. We wrote one strategic plan. We got everyone moving forward behind a shared goal of saying we will be the first city in America to end the digital device. Every child with a computer, access to the internet. Randy Ward, the superintendent of San Diego schools, said it would be the best thing you could do. Education 24/7. We can do it. The second part is taking best practices, things that work in other areas, and help replicate them. We got 10 examples in there. I'll give you one. Los Penasquitos Elementary School. 38 languages spoke at Los Pen. Kids poor. That all the reasons people tell you that children can't learn is Los Pen. Except they do it every day. Every day for the last 10 years, they've seen their API scores rise every single year. The principal just got back from the White House where President Obama awarded them the only blue ribbon in all of San Diego County. They're a top 10 school. Why? Not because they got any more money, because they deal under the same amount of money as every other school. Not because they get an exemption from any rules. They are a traditional public school. Not a charter school, not a private school, not a magnet school, traditional public school. Because they created an environment and culture. They subscribe to what's called the No Excuses University. No excuse. They're like, no excuse, you're going to learn. No excuse. Your parents didn't feed you breakfast, we'll feed you breakfast, we'll figure it out. No excuse, doesn't matter. And when you walk on the campus, you can feel the difference. First time I went there, I'm walking with the principal, Deanne McLaughlin. We're walking through. And this little 3rd grader comes up to me. He's about 7. And I said, hey, you going to college? And he looked at me with the greatest disdain. I mean, I have not been talked down to like this since Marine Corps boot camp. And he's like 7. He looked at me, he's like, of course. I was like, my bad, I'm sorry. He said, ask me where. I'm like, where? He's like, SC, fight on. And he walks off. He just walks off. That kid's dad has been incarcerated his whole life. His mom's functionally illiterate. There's not a person in his bloodline who ever set foot on a college campus. And this kid not only knows where he's going, the year he graduates, and what his major is. Because they do it different. At Los Pen, they don't just test at the end of the year. You know what they call the test at the end of the year? They call it the autopsy. They're like, what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with that information? What are you going to rewind time? They do shorter tests throughout the year. I mean, so they figured out a model. So what do? Well, it's a nominal cost to train the staff and how to do this model. I said, we'll create a Mayoral Foundation. I'll go back to those CEOs that said they need workers and say, fair enough, pony up. I'll get you the workers you're going to pay. Right, and we'll help replicate that in other ways. We'll create a STEM academy, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, as a feeder system for our UCs. There's a lot we can do. That's the second one, best practices. The third area of our education plan is workforce. And we got specific plans on a lot of stuff, is workforce. If you lose your job in today's world, unless, a lot of times folks lose their job through a permanent disruption, meaning that job's gone. When my dad's factory closed, that factory was gone. Right, but we just can't abandon the middle class. We just can't say, well, that's tough. No, we got to retrain you. We got to give you skills for the new job. We were talking earlier that you can't install solar panels in China. You might build them there, you can't install them there. So how do we retrain people for the jobs of today? Right? And a lot of places have done a much better job of workforce training. And then we'll do things like we put out an energy plan in the city. You would think that the only way to save any money in the city is pension reform. And we're going to deal with the pension system in a fair way. We can do it in a fair way. But there's other ideas. If the city would reduce its energy usage by 25%, we would save $86 million between now and 2020 of the general fund, $210 million out of enterprise funds. And you know what we do? We'd put a lot of San Diegans back to work because we'd use our local folks to upgrade those facilities, to retrofit those facilities, to do a better job. So workforce is our third. And then our fourth one is probably the least exciting but is important. And that's how do we get all of our government entities working together when it comes to education. So take libraries. It doesn't make any sense to me why all the libraries have the same hours. I mean, it doesn't make sense because like as if all of our neighborhoods and communities are the same. So you go into a senior community, that library needs to be open during the day because the seniors use it. That makes sense to me. You go into a working class community, that same library is open during the day, nobody's there because they're working. Well, that one should be open at night and on weekends. So what if we go to a school in that community and say, hey, your library needs to be open during the day because the kids use it, but how about at 4:30 it becomes a city library and we share the resources and we take the cost savings and we invest them in more hours and more computers and more tablets. When we're going to plan transit lines, how do we overlay that with where our schools are and how can we save money? So really get all of our government entities thinking about education. So that's the plan we laid out. It's on our website. We got a lot of other ideas in there, but the mayor can do that. It doesn't require another divisive ballot measure. You don't have to blame the teachers to blame this. You got to tackle some big problems, build some coalitions, and drive it through.